Okay, good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is John Zagrodzky. I'm the first selectman, and I came to this meeting tonight for a couple of reasons. One is that these flood investments that we've embarked on are pretty important, not just for you guys, but for the Board of Selectmen as well, and I speak for all of them when I say that we take this seriously, and we really are looking to make some investments that'll make a difference in the flood situation in town. As a review matter, the catalyst for all this was these storms, of course, that are now 3 years ago from summer of 2021. Those two major storms not only flooded the areas that we see flooding typically and have seen for a very long time, but also some areas that really never did flood in the past. Mainly, well, the Tilly Pond project, which is one that we have underway, and then the one that's being discussed tonight, the Salt Box project. When you looked at the flood maps that were produced after those storms, these were areas that just really didn't get flooding, certainly not like what we saw then. And so I think there's an imperative to try to go back and understand why, and then to make investments like we're planning tonight. So what you'll hear tonight is a status update for the Salt Box project. There are a variety of constituents for this project. There's some that are going to be helped by the project in terms of trying to alleviate the flooding concerns, but there are also folks that are affected by the project and are concerned about that. So the people who live down at the end where the project would actually flow out into Holly Pond, the folks around Seagate, some of them are here tonight. They've got concerns about silt buildup in the inlet, which is right down there by their home. And so what we're trying to do with this project is address all of these concerns with as much creativity and engineering as we can muster. As I've discussed with a few of those folks down on Seagate, we've got a couple of plans in place that we're testing to see if they might be reasonable responses to some of their concerns. I don't have any answers on that yet, but I will have them shortly, hopefully. But we also want to talk tonight about the engineering more broadly so that those who are going to benefit from this project can get an appreciation for what's being planned, but also a better understanding of timeline, when the investment might start, and when we actually might have some of these assets in place. So listen carefully. You've got two of the best professionals around to take you through kind of where we are right now and to answer your questions. But I would encourage you, please make your voice heard. If you've got questions or you're not clear about something, there is no such thing as a stupid question here. Believe me, I'm an expert asking stupid questions, so make sure you ask them, make sure you have a chance to make sure you're clear about what's going on. So thanks again for coming, and I'll let them take over.
Okay, thank you very much, First Selectman. My name is Ed Gentile, I'm the Director of Public Works. Just two quick other introductions. In front of you in the aisle, moving up and down, getting your signature is Darren Ostafine. He is the Assistant Director of Public Works. And Joe Canis from Ty & Bond is our Principal Engineer and Design Engineer, and he will take you through the presentation tonight. So we're here tonight to give you an update on the Salt Box area design. At the end, our consultant at the end of his presentation, there'll be time set aside for questions. We'll do our best with our consultant to answer any questions you may have. If we don't have the answers for you tonight, we will get you those answers. Just a reminder of why this area, as the First Selectman mentioned, back in 2021, July and September both, the Salt Box, Coach Lamp, and Du Bois area all had substantial flooding. And we were commissioned and directed by the Board of Selectmen to do a study on that area. From that study, we are taking that information now and putting it on paper for design to implement. So what have we been doing? A study commissioned by the board has given us direction. Our consultant's been working diligently on this design and the plans, and reached a point now where we could take this out to you stakeholders and submit and update you and submit applications to the DEP, Army Corps, our area EPC, and any other regulatory body. So we're getting to that point, we're getting kind of close. So we thought it was important, maybe just before the holidays, to get you to come in here and kind of give you an update where we stand. Our consultant will touch base on our progress, and also at the end of it, we'll talk about current schedule and what the outlooks for that are. The presentation is not very long, but it contains some detailed and educational information for you folks. Please hold your questions until the end when we'll open it up to the public. give us an opportunity to maybe get through the presentation. Maybe your question will be answered before the end. This presentation is being videotaped and will be posted on Channel 79 section of the town website, as well as the PowerPoint presentation will be located in the Public Works section also. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe Canis from Ty and Bond. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, my name is Joe Canis. I'm a principal engineer at Ty and Bond in our Shelton, Connecticut office. And I'm excited to be able to give you an update on the Saltbox Lane project. I know many of you were here back in May of 2023 when we did our first presentation. And here we are today with some more updates. So tonight's presentation outline, we're going to go over do an overview of our initial study that we did in 2022 and completed in 2023. And then we're going to talk about the design process. So out of that study, we made design recommendations, which we've since moved forward with. And then we're going to talk about how we refine our design. We're going to talk about some of the cross-country routes, areas where the storm drainage piping comes off the public roadway and goes through private properties to get to another street. We're going to be eliminating some of those cross-country routes. We're going to talk about easements. We weren't able to eliminate all the proposed cross-country routes, so we'll need to get easements across certain properties. And then we're going to talk about the next steps, right? We've come up with this design. We're about 70% done with our design, but there's still more work ahead of us. And some of that work also includes permitting. There are different levels of permitting. You know, being a fairly large project, there's permitting at the state, federal, and local level. And then finally, as Ed had said, we will have wrap up, and then feel free to ask questions, and we'll provide our answers to the best of our ability. If we don't have an answer for you tonight, we will get back to you. So just to recap our presentation from May of 2023, some of the key takeaways from that is that the existing storm drainage system in the Saltbox Lane area is extremely undersized. It only handles a 2-year event. Which is only about 3 to 4 inches in a 24-hour period, 3 to 4 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period. For reference, the Town of Darien design standard is a 25-year design storm. So you're up at like 5.5, 6 inches of rain in a 24-hour period is what it really should handle if that system were to be designed today. And also, at low points, there is also a 50-year standard in Darien. The system also has multiple choke points. You'll see, I have a graphic in one of my subsequent slides, is that the pipe sizing is inconsistent. You'll have a smaller pipe go into a larger pipe, and that larger pipe goes into a smaller pipe. Never a good thing. Increasing precipitation depth and frequency. Most of you who live in Darien have probably seen it, have experienced it. The storms are more intense now, right? We're seeing more rainfall. It tends to be more intense. So that's something else that has changed since this system was first constructed in the 1950s. And then the final key takeaway is that there's certainly opportunities for improvement, not only just increasing pipe sizes, but also improving sediment capture and other opportunities for water quality improvement. So some of the conclusions we had from our study, again, because most of these streets in the Saltbox Lane neighborhood were built out in the 50s and the 60s, it was designed to the standards that were in effect back then, right? And as we know, as rainfall has gotten more intense, they've just become undersized as weather patterns have changed. We've also found, right, based on photo documentation, that some areas can flood by about 3 to 4 feet of water. Now, it's not there, for days on end, but, it's still, an intersection goes underwater. It is a problem for emergency vehicles, so that's something that needs to be addressed. The other thing we found is that a lot of the catch basins don't have adequate sumps. The sump is the portion of the catch basin below the lowest point, below the lowest pipe, that enables debris to be captured, such as road sand or leaves. So it gets captured in the sump instead of being discharged out through the pipe. And then finally, what we did recommend is because of the number of low points, there are a number of low points along these roadways on Saltbox Lane, Coach Lamp, for example, Du Bois, that we recommended a 50-year design for the entire pipe network. And remember, the town standard is a 25-year design. So just an overview of the existing drainage system. What you see here highlighted in the heavy black line is what's considered the watershed area. So that black line. So theoretically, any drop of water that hits the land within this black line goes into the storm drainage system, down Saltbox Lane, and into Holly Pond. So that's the area that the storm system serves. And it's made up of various pipe sizes. You can see here, you start off at the top of the watershed where your flow is the smallest, right? You got 12-inch pipes that then feed into some 15-inch pipes as you're coming down. You can see we're moving further south downstream. In Coach Lamp, it looks like we have a couple 18-inch pipes, and then a little short segment of 24-inch. And then we have a few 30-inch pipes. Now, this is where something important to point out is we have a 30-inch pipe coming down Seagate, right? And we also have a 12-inch over here coming through Patricia, through these properties here from Patricia to Du Bois. And then what happens is, you can see we have a section of 36-inch. So we have a 30-inch pipe that goes to a 36, that goes back down to a 30. And then we also have a 36 that goes into a 12. So traditionally, you would design it so that your pipe sizes are constantly increasing as you go downstream. So these could be potential choke points, and we did determine that at least one of these was a significant choke point. And then there's also a drainage channel that runs behind the properties on the east side of Saltbox. And that is drained by a head wall into a 30-inch pipe and then back into Saltbox Lane. One thing I do want to point out here is we did not depict the state storm drainage system in Boston Post Road. There's a connection that comes down the Post Road. The town doesn't have any jurisdiction over that, but we did account for that drainage that's contributory to that system at our outlet point. So under existing conditions, this is an enlargement of the Saltbox Lane East, Coach Lamp Lane area. And you can see the existing pipe network, right? The 30-inch, right? 30-inch coming down. And what you see here in blue are the areas that would flood in a 50-year storm event. And a 50-year storm event, using the current precipitation data tables, is 7.5 inches of rain, a little shy of 7.5 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. And what happens is up to 12 structures can be directly impacted. And by directly impacted, I mean water up against the structure. And then you also have 31 structures that are access impaired. And what I mean by access impaired is that the roadway in front of the structure has a foot or more of water in front of it, making it difficult for emergency vehicles to pass through. Now, for a 100-year storm, you can see how that grows, right? Because we go from a little shy of 7.5 inches of rain in a 24-hour period to 8.3 inches of rain in that same 24-hour period. And you can see how the number of structures impacted directly increases, 29, those are the ones in pink. And then 41 structures are access impaired, including 16 up here on Thomasina that are off the graph here. So the proposed system, you can see here what we have is a box culvert that comes down Saltbox Lane from the Saltbox Lane East intersection. It measures 5 feet wide, 3 feet high, and it comes across the Post Road and then discharges down Seagate Road into Holly Pond. And you can see we have, we're increasing a lot, all the pipe sizes, larger pipes. You have a 48-inch coming down Saltbox Lane East, which used to be a 30. But the key takeaway from this is our model does not show any of the catch basins with surcharge in a storm event. So what you see here in the dashed blue line, the darker blue line, that was the extent of the 50-year flood under existing conditions. And you can see that we're not expecting any ponding in the 50-year event. Now, we also looked at the proposed system's performance for the 100-year storm event. which is, and I apologize, this graphic is incorrect. I just noticed that this should be 100 here, 1%, and 1.32 inches of rain. But you'll see areas of purple here, right here, right here, and right here. Those are areas that would flood, but the flooding is 1 foot or less. And if you compare that to where the present limit of flooding, for expected flooding for the 100-year event, you know, you can see that this would shrink that quite a bit. So I mentioned pipes and box culverts. I just want to make sure that, just to clarify for everybody, that the difference between the two. Pipes are, you know, traditionally what you think of pipes, right? They're round. In this case, what we're looking at is either reinforced concrete pipe, or for some of the smaller pipes, we're looking at PVC. The key advantage of it, you know, they're readily available, they're easier to install, and they're lower cost. They don't carry as much as a box culvert, though. The concrete box culvert has a longer lead time. It's more challenging to install. You can see you got 2 guys here, and you got 3 guys in this one. So, but it is more challenging to install just because it's larger, heavier. But the key advantage is that it provides a lot more capacity than your traditional round pipe. So that's why we selected the box culvert to go down Saltbox Lane and down to Seagate. Otherwise, we're looking at a pipe that was probably like about 5.5, maybe even 6 feet in diameter. So now that, you know, that was an overview of our study recommendations. So since that time, we've started the design. There was a selected alternate, and we've moved forward with that. And so in order to design, though, we need a lot more specific information than we would need for a study. So the first step was having a topographic survey and a utility survey done of the work area. So that's been completed. And what that does, that tells us the elevations of the road along the entire length of this project area. It also tells us, you know, how deep the pipes are, what the rim elevations are, where utilities are. Not all the utilities, but it's the cornerstone of the design. Then there's a field review, right? We review the survey, and sometimes there are things that like, this doesn't make sense, so we'll go back out in the field, take a look, and make notes and adjustments based on that. And then, you know, there are things that you can't see, right? We can't see into the pipes under the ground. So there are some additional, if there's additional questions like, where does this pipe really connect? For example, you know, the surveyor can't really see where it goes. So what we do is we video record certain pipe segments that we still have questions about. So we did that process. And then the other thing is, although our survey does have utility information on it, we also go back to the utility companies and get their mapping as well, just to see what's changed, or, you know, if there's anything that might have been missed on the survey. So we have completed all those steps. And with the utility mapping, again, you know, it's important to understand where the utilities are to try to minimize those conflicts, right, to make sure we're not installing pipe right through an electric duct bank or something like that, because that would only slow down the construction process. We want to try to keep that moving as efficient as possible, so that's why we take a look at the utility mapping. And we do have some potential conflicts that we're working with Eversource and Aquarian on between some underground electric and some water mains, and so we're working through that process. The other thing about requesting utility mapping is that it alerts the utility companies to the project. So we have reached out to utility companies and gotten mapping, and you'll be surprised about with the number of utility companies that we had to contact. You know, some of these I didn't even know existed, but we did, you know, we're made aware of it, and we did get information from them. So all that is information that we use to bring into the design. And just want to reiterate our design goals. These are our primary design goals. You know, the first is obviously, as a drainage project, you want to reduce flooding. So obviously that's one of the first goals we'll list. The other is, you think about minimize construction impact, right? The way we lay the pipes out, how deep they are, it all has an impact on how things are constructed. So we want to do that as efficiently as possible, right? We try to minimize the impacts on roads, minimize detours. So those are all things that go into the design process. Also minimize easements, right? Easements are costly. The other thing is it takes time to get them, and it's always better to have something that you can maintain in your right-of-way to the extent that you can. Sometimes that's not always possible due to topography or other reasons, but we try to minimize them where possible. The other thing is, in addition to being, a flood reduction project, this also is an opportunity to improve water quality. So some of the things that we look at are to, look at the types of basins that we're replacing to improve sediment and debris capture. How can we minimize the amount of sediment that's being transported to the system and ultimately to Holly Pond? And then finally, although this is a real flood reduction project for much of the area, the study area north of the Post Road. South of the Post Road, it's a little different now in Seagate Lane. They're affected differently. They don't have the flooding issues that people residents north of the Post Road experience. So it's important that we also are sensitive to their concerns. And we have had a few meetings with the neighbors there. So as so we have all this information. We start to place our pipes, on the plans, try to figure out what the best way to connect them, where they should go, and so then we start to refine the design. So the first one is the horizontal alignment of the pipes, and what that is, that's where does the pipe fit in the roadway? How does it connect to other pipes? So what we try to do is, again, this is where reduction of easements comes in, and we also have to consider the traffic operations, right? If you run a pipe straight down the middle of the road, you're probably going to have to close that road for construction, right? Which is going to unduly burden the residents. So what we try to do is try to shift that pipe to one side of the road or the other. That way, you can have at least alternating one-way traffic. Now, there will be times where the contractor might reach out to a resident to try to understand what their schedule is, so that they might need to block a driveway temporarily for a couple hours. But well, obviously try to keep that to a minimum, but that's just unfortunately a reality of construction. And we'll also look at the vertical alignment, which is basically how deep the pipes are, right? We want to try to minimize the depth, but we also want to place them so that we're minimizing utility conflicts, right? If we put a pipe up too high, we might be conflicting with underground electric. If we put it too low, it might be just like too crazy deep and it cause additional construction expense, or it could conflict with sanitary sewer. So there's a lot of different things that we look at there as well. So adjusting for utility conflicts, these are some other things, right? If you're trenching on one side of the road or the other, you might be close to a utility pole. So we have to call out on the plans that certain utility poles need temporary support during construction as they're trenching past that pole. And then also looking at the edge impacts. Right, there are a lot of driveways in the area, so we have to be cognizant of what we're disturbing. Driveway aprons, make sure that if we're disturbing Belgian block aprons, the homeowner's aware of it, and that it's reflected in the contractor's bid price as well. Mailboxes getting reset, curbing, things like that. And as part of the project, one of the very first tasks the contractor will have to do is an existing conditions survey, which is basically a video of all the existing conditions along the roadway. All right, so that said, we've been working hard. Our staff has been working hard, and this is the proposed drainage network. It's very similar to the slide I showed you earlier. Probably the principal difference here is this drawing is rotated 90 degrees, so north is to the right. So we have Seagate is right over here, Salt Box, and then Stanton's over here. So we have a cross-country connection here, one from Coach Lamp to Salt Box East here, another one from Thomasina down to Coach Lamp, and then from Du Bois over to Coach Lamp. And what you'll see in the next slide is we were able to eliminate some of these cross-country routes, right? There's some existing ones that we eliminated by essentially going around the property because we had the opportunity. The first is coming from Gardner down to the end of Salt Box. There's an existing pipe that runs through here. We found that if we took the pipe down Gardner, down Coach Lamp, and then utilize an existing easement, we could avoid having to run new pipe on those properties. Same thing here on, at the end of Pleasant. At the end of Pleasant, the existing pipe actually heads to the east and then takes a sharp turn to the south, back up to Coach Lamp. The town owns a small piece of right-of-way that connects the end of Pleasant to Coach Lamp, so we can bypass that. Another one that we're able to bypass comes from Du Bois, straight out to Coach Lamp. It goes through, you can see these properties here. What we're able to do was by taking the pipe and storm drain and running it up down Thomasina, down to an existing pipe crossing, we were able to eliminate that one as well. And then finally, the last one we were able to eliminate was going through a few properties here on Patricia Lane. We were able to route it around. And one of the key things here, though, is the pipes that have been eliminated in these cross-country routes won't be taken out of service. Those pipes will remain. And the town is going to continue to maintain the pipes within its easements. So even though we're not replacing it, it becomes part of the overall drainage network. It's just becomes supplementary instead of a main conveyance for the storm drain. So easements, just to clarify, easements allow for legal access to a property for a specific purpose. In this case, it's for construction of storm drains. Some properties already have easements for the purpose of storm drains. But the project will require from some properties an easement to construct and maintain a storm drain. Another type of easement the town would be looking for is a temporary easement to allow construction of a storm drain. So the storm drain might not be physically present within the easement, but there might be an area of the property where the contractor might need to work to allow them to access the trench within the permanent easement. So the town has sent letters to property owners where the easements may be necessary. If you feel there's an easement on your property and the town hasn't contacted you, please feel free to reach out to either Ed or Darren. All right, so some of the proposed easements that we're looking for, again, we have two types that the project will require. The first is where a new permanent easement may be proposed. You see those properties in green. Some of those properties already have an existing storm drain on their property, but no easement. So we're looking to correct that. Some properties may require a new temporary easement, just for the purposes of construction. So those are shown in the pink color. And then finally, the ones that I've highlighted there with the red border are properties where an easement already exists. And you can see a lot of the properties here on the east side of Saltbox, that easement's associated with this channel in the back, just for clarification. So that's where we are. So the next steps are, first of all, we're about 70% of the way through our design. Right, so I need to, the whole system ends up discharging to Holly Pond, right? So as part of that, we have to design an end wall there. And because, the coastal nature and we're not sure what the soils are like under there, we have to obtain boring data for the proposed box culvert end wall, right? The end wall is going to stabilize that box culvert and keep it from moving up and down into the tides. So that's something we need to do. We've been working with the neighbors to secure an easement for that. We'll also have to do the structural design of the end wall. Once we get that underlying soils data, we can complete the structural design of that end wall. We have to conclude our meetings with Eversource and Aquarian regarding utility relocations. And then we have to schedule our pre-application meetings with the regulatory agencies. So those are the immediate next steps. And since I spoke about permitting, I can give you a refresher on what's going to be required for permitting requirements. Locally, we will require a inland wetlands and watercourses permit from the EPC. Probably about 2 to 3 months is what we estimate. We're crossing the post road, right? Because we'll be working in the state right away. We'll require an encroachment permit from the District 3 office of the Connecticut Department of Transportation. That'll be 2 to 3 months. And these can be applied for simultaneously. All these permits we plan on applying concurrently for. Probably the heaviest permit lift on our end is from the DEP. The first thing we have to do is a natural diversity database review. We will be submitting for that shortly. And what that is, it's basically a consultation with DEP's wildlife people to screen for the potential for endangered or threatened species. You can see here in the lower right is a map of the DEP's endangered and threatened species from their database, and you can see all of Holly Pond is an area of concern. So that's why we have to submit for the consultation. That doesn't take too long. You usually get an answer in about 2 to 3 weeks. The other thing we have to do is a structures dredging and fill permit because we're working in tidal waters. A tidal wetlands permit because we're working in tidal wetlands. So one's related to the structure, the other's related to the disturbance within the tidal wetlands. And then because we have to apply for an Army Corps permit for the modification of the existing or replacement of the existing end wall, we're required to apply for a 4-1 water quality certification as well. And that process would take about 6 to 9 months. And then before we submit for our state permit, we have to submit for a historic preservation review from the state of Connecticut. And as part of that, we also submit to the Mashantucket Pequot tribe as well as the Mohegan tribe too, because the conditions of the Army Corps permit require submissions to those 3 entities. And typically, that review takes about a month or so. And then finally, I mentioned Army Corps. We expect to be eligible for general permit number 6B. The Army Corps has what they call a Connecticut general permit, and it's broken down into 21 or 22 categories. Category 6B is related to storm drainage outfalls. So what the Corps is really going to be interested in are the localized impacts. They won't be so concerned with flooding, particularly considering that the project area is 125 acres and the contributing drainage area to Holly Pond is 8,000 acres. So the project's about 1%, maybe 1.5% of the total contributing area to Holly Pond. So their focus will be on the immediate impacts at the outfall. Those plans, just like this permit application, just like the DEP application, requires a defined plan with limits, clearly stated limits of disturbance. Some of the other things that they would be looking for is some characterization of the material removed. Is it muck? Is it sand? What's it composed of? And this particular permit, it's to stay under the pre-construction notification regime, which keeps us in this 6 to 9 month time frame. Our area disturbance of the tidal wetlands will have to be ½ acre or less. If we exceed that, that kicks us into an individual permit, and that could be, 1, 2, 3 years. I have a project in Bridgeport. We're on year 5 of trying to get our individual permit. And like I said, so there's 3 different paths in the Army Corps permitting process under the Connecticut General Permit. There's a self-verification, which is kind of like, okay, you submit something, we're doing this project, and if you don't hear from them, you're good to go. There's a pre-construction notification, which is kind of like the middle ground, which requires their internal review, but it's not a very rigorous review. And then there's the individual permit, which is a very fully detailed review. So no title projects are eligible for the self-verification route, the easy route. So we're going with the middle route, which is the only one that's available. So the next steps, once everything falls in line with the permitting, what happens after that is we incorporate our conditions of approval, any feedback that we get from the agencies during the course of the review. We do our final coordination with utility companies, make sure nothing has changed on their end. The last thing we want to do is, install our pipe, mill and pave the roadway, and then have the utility company say, oh, we're replacing the gas mains or something like that. So we want to make sure that we're coordinated with them, that they understand our schedule. Complete the easement documents. Then we, as part of this, we have to present our final opinion of probable construction costs to the town. So that's essentially the engineer's estimate of what the construction cost will be. And then the town needs to secure the funding to make sure it has funds lined up to proceed with the project. And then once that happens, we'll finalize the bid specifications, which are basically the written instructions to the contractor that end up being like 600, 700 pages. It's quite a document. And then once all that's done, the project can be released for bid. Our current thinking based on the timelines, where we are, where we need to go, we expect this to be released for bid in June 2026. And that is subject to the town approving funding for this. And then finally, once all that's said and done, the project can be awarded through the bid process, and a contractor comes on board. So when the contractor comes on board, it's what to expect during construction, right? We anticipate it'll take about 12 months from start to finish, excluding winter shutdown. You might be fortunate enough to have a contractor, or in a very warm winter that decides just to keep working. We've seen a lot of that over the past few years. Construction, because it's a drainage project, all right, you always start at the downstream end and work your way up. So access to properties will be maintained at all times, within reason. There might be times where a contractor would need to just work with a property owner to let them know that, they might need access from like 11 to 1. There might be a time where you can't get to your property. The contractor is also required to deploy sediment and erosion controls. This is a town project, so it should be an example for all the other contractors working on projects in town as to what to do. So the town will be looking very closely at that. And some of the measures would include silt fencing, catch basin inserts, which is basically filter fabric that you place in a catch basin to prevent debris from washing in, a turbidity curtain and a cofferdam, right, because we're doing work at the Holly Pond Inlet. That requires some specialized water handling approaches. And then at the end, remove sediment from the impacted inlet area as approved by, within the limits approved by DEP and the Army Corps. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to open it up to questions. I don't know, do we have a specific procedure how you want to handle that, Darren? Just go up to the microphone. Sure.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time with us tonight. I'm Dan White from 2 Seagate Road. I'm with the Seagate Association. As most people know, we're a 19-family association. We share the inlet, sort of shared recreational area, dock, moorings. We're really lucky and fortunate to live on just a beautiful block. We have a really fun Christmas party and pool party. As John outlined at the beginning, we do have a number of concerns with the project. I would say they are in a few broad buckets: environmental, financial, health and safety, and aesthetics. These obviously all conflict with the town's policy for flood investments, which is intended to do no harm. So we've been raising these issues for approximately 18 months now. You'll hear from a number of my neighbors tonight with sort of specific questions and concerns on these issues again. That being said, we recognize the priority of this project for the town and our Saltbox neighbors. So we want to support the project. We want to help find a solution. We just want guardrails and commitments so that, our property isn't destroyed. So I would really just encourage the people from Saltbox, push on these guys to, cooperate with us.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob Burke. I'm at 15 Seagate. I was at a talk last night about the dangers of social media for children. I promise I'm not on TikTok right now. I have my notes on my phone. So first of all, thank you. Appreciate the information. My two concerns, one, I have a low tide concern and a high tide concern. So low tide is if there's increased sediment buildup in the inlet where we live, I live on the inlet, it could potentially turn it into a mud flat. And part of that concern is aesthetic. It's a beautiful place and we should preserve it as such, but also it's a safety issue. I don't know if you've stepped into Holly Pond there, but it's like quicksand, and if that were just mud, it could be a safety. We have like 18 or 20 young kids in our neighborhood. That could be a safety concern. It's also an environmental concern, mosquitoes and all the issues they bring. The second one's a high tide problem, which is to the extent there's more sediment in the inlet and it shallows, it would have less capacity to handle water levels. And I believe this project would increase water flow in a shorter period of time during a storm. And if that coincides with a high tide, it could cause flooding around the inlet. It's not an academic issue. I've already had water up to my house. And so if that is exacerbated, it could cause flooding on the lower end. So for me to adhere to the principle of no harm, I think there needs to be steps to create more capacity in the inlet and also to prevent it from filling in further from sediment or other debris or materials. Thanks.
Thanks. To address your comment, we absolutely agree. One of the goals for the project is to reduce the amount of sediment that's delivered to that outlet. So as part of that, within the limits that DEP approves us, when we replace that head wall, we are going to remove sediment to the extent that we're permitted to. And then once construction is complete, the catch basins within the system will have more sediment capture ability. And by resolving the flooding issues upstream, right, where water runs across the landscape, picking up sediment and debris, that will be reduced, right? You won't have that overland flooding. So that'll also reduce sediment loads going forward.
Bill Wright, 8 Seagate Road. This is for the record. Seagate residents have not seen, number one, detailed engineering drawings to handle the stormwater convergence of 4 culvert systems in the mixing chamber. That's Salt Box, Post Road, Seagate Brook, and the culvert to Seagate Inlet. Number two, we have not seen detailed engineering drawings for the box culvert spillway into the inlet to counter the force you just talked about, but we've seen no details of high volume water coming from the box culvert to prevent undermining of the head wall, prevent delta of sediment into the inlet, and prevent damage to the dock and moorings. Number three, we have not seen any detailed engineering drawings for plan of temporary sheet piling containment area at the outflow to capture this unexpected road excavation, erosion, and the facilities to remove it. Number four, we have not seen detailed engineering drawings to incorporate the baffles into the 3x5 box culvert to slow down energy of water before entering the inlet. Number five, we have not seen detailed engineering drawings of sediment detention chamber within the 3x5 box culvert to capture sediment before going into the inlet. All of these we have requested for some time, and we must have this detail to move forward. It's very important to not treat this wonderful embayment of Seagate Inlet as just another storm water release point into a water course. It's an extraordinary natural resource of scenic beauty. The sediment, road debris carried by stormwater in such a much larger culvert system must be engineered to not reach this narrow inlet and fill it in. The project must be overly sensitive to silting and disrupting this town treasure. We have not seen this in actual plans to date. We are to be harmed downstream without correcting the current approach. Thanks.
Thanks. And and to respond to that comment, we are working on finalizing those engineering drawings, and we'll continue working with the association.
My name's Todd Sweedock. I've lived on Seagate since 1975. I'm currently there now raising my own children in the house that I grew up in. I'm street president with Dan, and nothing means more to me and my family than Seagate and the inlet that we're talking about here today. We're doing all of this, and everybody's here today based off flooding in 2021, which was, I believe, a 100-year flood. What we're talking about is putting in barriers to change a system and to accommodate for a 50-year flood. So that being said, this would not truly fix the problem that happened in 2021. We haven't seen, And we have requested, we haven't seen any insurance claims for damage to the houses that happened in 2021 on Saltbox. We haven't seen a cost-benefit analysis for what this will do to help the town and these people. And it sounds like that all this money, which happens to be, which has been estimated on your opinion between $7 and $8 million, is this the most important thing to do in the town of Darien as far as flooding is concerned. This past August, we had over 5.5 inches of rain, which would categorize as a 50-year storm. And I personally drove by Saltbox and saw 0 flooding. Seagate had 0 flooding. All the storm drains that have been in place since the 50s were working fine. But yet, right down the road here, you could not access Town Hall. The river right here was completely flooded, and the fields continue to flood on much, much lesser rainfalls. This has been a concern of ours for a very long time. What it's done to us is in all these talks is we've been very confused about where we fall in the prioritization. We've talked behind scenes, we've met with you guys personally, and we hope that the talks can continue and that we can come up with a plan where everybody's happy. We're scared with this giant 3x5 culvert going in for the children on our street. There's over 20 of them. We're scared for the amount of sediment that could come, and we're scared that there's no plan B. There's no other waterway, there's no other place in town that dredges directly into a harbor. This has been behind the scenes, there's been talk about dredging. We'd like to know more about that and the possibility of that. The mud flat, as other people have brought up, would devalue our homes, ruin the beauty of our street, and also truly endanger people, as we talked about before, that it does become a quicksand. And we have many, many little children. Myself, having grown up on a pond, I have fallen in many times. It is a dangerous thing. But we just want to reiterate how beautiful this is. It's been on the cover of the Darien News Review 15 times in the last 40 years. It's one of the most beautiful spots in town, and we are all very lucky to live there or be close to it. Our street is constantly full of people walking their dogs and enjoying how beautiful Seagate is. It's the most picturesque street in Darien. The people on Long Neck Point probably say different, but other than that, we have one of the best places you could ever live. And we are truly, truly concerned, and we would love for the town and Saltbox, everybody to help us out to come up with a solution where we do not lose our harbor to sediment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Natalie Medlicott, 14 Saltbox Lane. I really appreciate the work that you've put into this and the thought that's going into it. Appreciate the concern of the neighbours on Seagate, but obviously everyone on my side of the street was flooded quite severely. Our damages were over $60,000. So there's no dispute that property owners on Saltbox suffered massive losses. I had a question about the funding. You said that was going to come in maybe 2 years, but my understanding was that there had potentially been money put aside for that already. So just like to know what the process is for the funding.
Okay, that sounds like a DPW question.
Yeah, I think when Joe had mentioned that the funding would have to be approved through the approval process, through the budgetary process, which is what we're trying to do. The funding that we had gotten for the design was ARPA funding from the federal government, which is what we're carrying this thing through. But once we're done and have the opinion of probable cost from Joe, we're going to have to go through the process, the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and the RTM for them to approve the project, which is right now estimated at $6.7 million. Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Ferrera. I live at 9 Thomasina Lane. Our house was flooded both times during both of those storms in 2021, and our damages were in excess of $100,000 because we had to rebuild 2 times in 6 weeks. So thank you very much for this. I think this has been really interesting to hear, and I'm happy to see that this is moving along. So one of the concerns I have, and it might be too specific for us to discuss in the meeting, we can discuss afterwards if needed, but I noticed we are one of the houses that received a letter that notifying us that there'll be an easement requested of us. I noticed that there is another pipe running from, I think it was Dubois to Coach Lamp,
Right.
that you are eliminating and not needing to do construction on, so you're going to keep ours, the one that runs
Correct.
along 9 Thomasina. So if you can explain the rationale for that, I would love to hear that.
Sure. And the reason for that was we try to minimize those. And unfortunately, right, so we try to follow the topography. And that cross-country easement on Dubois Street is a little bit higher than the one on Thomasina. So naturally, the stormwater is going to follow gravity. So that's why we selected the through route to go through the Thomasina property. Now, we are increasing that pipe size going through there. And, with the easement, we'll have to discuss, with you, when we get to that point. But, I know the property line's tight, so we're going to have to really take a close look at, how we can really get that pipe through there and minimize the impact to your property. But the reason why is just simple topography. It just made sense instead of fighting grade coming from Thomasina into the Dubois, we went the other way just because the gravity is going that way. Oh, sure.
So what is that process? Because that is something, we obviously want to sit down and go through the plans. Sorry, okay. So we want to sit down with, whether it's, you directly, whether it's the town, whether it's the contractors, to really understand what the impact, before granting the easement, what the impact is going to be to our property, and obviously our property
Right, yeah,
values.
so the general process for an easement is we will generate a map that shows the initial impacts. And then the town will initiate the negotiation with you, probably a representative from DPW. And Ed, I haven't been involved in these, but I'm assuming the town attorney also is involved at some point, and once you get through. Right, so it's a process, where they meet with you, and it doesn't all happen in one meeting. There's some back and forth, and then, depending on the nature of the easement, right. Right, yeah, so there is a process, and it varies depending on, the extent of the impacts on the property and things like that. So the town will be reaching out to you, I would assume shortly. Okay, thanks.
My name is Jürgen Kremer. I live on Saltbox Lane East. At the beginning of this open drainage
At the end of the cul-de-sac?
at the cul-de-sac. And my question is, what are your plans with respect to this open drainage?
Okay, yeah, for the open, that's a good question. Right now, there's a lot of drainage that contributes from the east of Saltbox Lane East into that channel.
Right.
Right, we're going to be taking that into the pipes.
So are you eliminating those pipes that are feeding this?
Well,
this
that's a good point. One thing we'll have to take a look at, because that is wetland, right? So we'll have to maintain a small little amount of flow in there, right? So we're not going to, blast the storm drain into there, but, there'll be a much smaller drain that goes there to feed it just to keep it a wetland.
Yeah, the problem is that we have standing water. There is a little bit of rain, and there is standing water all summer long because it's not flowing
Right,
down
and as
to
part of,
where it's supposed to flow.
We will look at that channel, give it a second look to, see what we could do to maybe regrade, part of it, clean it out or something like that. Because it is, it is under a town easement.
Yeah.
So it's a town maintenance.
Okay.
All right,
Thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Chris Leary, and I live at 10 Seagate. And I'd like to say I was born here like Todd, but I wasn't. I was born town across. And I've only lived here for a year, but I've owned the property on Seagate since 2017. And the reason why I just got the CO last month was due to the challenges of all the government agencies to which you have referred to in the presentation. So I empathize with the challenges you have, and it will be a very important walk. And I'm not going to repeat anything that's been said already by my neighbors, but I'd like to, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but I've owned a lot of houses, and every single one of them during big storms get water in the basement. And the water comes in for a variety of reasons. It could be backed up gutters. You know, this town has a great sewer system, but if you're on septic, the septic fields fill. You can only have a certain perp test for a number of bathrooms and bedrooms, et cetera. So the first question I have is, has any of the money that's been spent on this survey actually looked at the soil content of any of the homes that have been flooded? You know, one of the richest guys in Connecticut is Mr. Connecticut Basement Guy. And he goes in and he puts French drains in and all the rest, and all the water's kicked out. I've owned 2 of those systems, and I can tell you they work great. But the fact of the matter is, water can never be stopped. It has to be redirected someplace else. So my first question is, has any money been spent to look at the topography, the soil contact, the rock grade, and et cetera, about the geological composition of the properties where they're having the water flooding issues?
When we do our hydrologic analysis, we do look at the soil, right? There are different types of soils. They're called different hydrologic soil groups. You know, there's, you know, gravelly soils like you have in Wilton, which drain like that. Darien has a reputation for having very poor soils, right? So we did look at the underlying soil survey, and you know, it's more of a generalized, you know, high-level look. But, you know, it showed that the soils in the area are poor, which you would expect, because a lot of the Saltbox Lane area coming down, used to be a natural drainage channel, natural stream, which is actually, I would believe, is what that last remnant is on Seagate, on the west side of Seagate. So we did look at that, but a lot of the issues aren't strictly just getting water in the basement. It's, you know, we actually have photos of overland flow, like flood water is actually pounding against somebody's garage on Thomasina. So, and you can see in one of these pictures, like for this one here on the right, I believe that is, I don't remember exactly where that was taken, but you can see the water does get pretty high, and it can get into people's homes. I believe there was one at the end of Saltbox where it wasn't water infiltration of the basement. It was actually coming through like the first floor door.
I feel for the people who own that home, and that's not kind of my point, but you know, it's not necessarily a solution to make an 18-inch pipe go to a 12 to a 10 or whatever it is. That's not necessarily the solution, because the gentleman who just spoke, the water pooling on his property, that's a perp test. You know, and unless you drill down 4 or 5 feet, the top layer, I mean, you don't know how it's going to get out. So I would hope that in part of this study is not just build a pipe, but also looking to see if there are other areas. I was also curious to see, and I apologize, I was not at the other meeting, but the map that you showed looks like all the property stops at 95. Have you looked at basically the pitch levels to go up, the water go maybe towards here, to the stream that Todd mentioned by the fields, or some of the other areas which might be closer and less invasive as far as the construction?
The challenge with directing, right, you have a watershed, so I had that black line that showed, you know, if a drop of water falls anywhere within that black line, right, it ends up in Holly Pond. The problem is, if to try to direct it somewhere else, there are basically high points that you have to try to get through, right? So you might not be able to get there by gravity. It's like if you were to divert it into, like you said, up towards 95, for example, right? You have to install something like a pump station.
Well, just to stop you, I'm not saying you're going to go uphill to 95. I'm just saying is the fact that there are other areas along the coastline here.
Oh, do you have directed to
Because basically the problem with the Saltbox Lane, as I'm sure you know, is the fact that it's kind of like a bathtub. So when the silt comes in, because of the 2 dams, it can't get out. It can't go anywhere else. So basically, the silt builds, the water goes out, and then we have the problem. So I'm just kind of wondering if you've looked at some of the other areas to which it's a direct access into Long Island Sound and not into Holly Pond.
Yeah, we didn't specifically look at bringing the pipe, for example, coming out of Saltbox and then going further west or east down the Post Road. That would require a lot more state involvement because that's a state roadway. We could, maybe expand on that in our response and separately. But yeah, we did not spend a lot of time looking at going east or west on the Post Road because this is where the drainage comes out now, right? We're trying to, one of the state's overall permitting goals is to try to release water in the same general area that it, comes out. You really don't want to change drainage patterns, otherwise it becomes a diversion permit, which becomes it's a much more difficult permit to get. But Ed and I can discuss that and get back to you.
Okay, I can appreciate that. I was just kind of curious. So my house, and I don't, somehow Mother Nature can determine a 5-year, a 25, or a 100-year flood. But my house, I don't know how many hundreds of years won't flood because of all the restrictions I had to adhere to get it built in the last 7 years. But basically, what happens to the liability to the homeowners to which have had a standing house for many, many years, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that now will be flooded due to the silt coming into the pond? Is that a recourse against the town? Is that a recourse against the state? Or is it, who's the recourse to them, by the way?
Well, that's more of a legal question, so, and I'm not an attorney, but we anticipate less silt getting into Holly Pond as a result of this project.
I'm going to throw the progressive red flag on that one because this collection of silt and the materials that you've talked about is really not a very good solution. It's not like a Mr. Coffee filter that's going to stop the thing and every day you go in the morning and you pull it out. There's going to have to be funding that goes through to clean out all those filters, to look at the papers. One big log goes through and blocks the whole thing. I've got pictures, if you'd like, today about when it was blowing the water out of the end of the culvert and when it was trickling out. When it was blowing the water out, it was clear, and it looked like you could drink it. When it was down to a trickle in the afternoon, it was all brown and full of sludge. So, part of your pipe analysis, which I'm not going to get into, but basically the sediment's all along the pipe. The volume of the water will move the sediment depending on how much volume there is. So I don't really care how many inches, but I would think that the smarter and less expensive way would be to replace the parts of the pipe that are too small to make it consistent, and you'd probably save 90% of the money and it could go to the Board of Education or something, but just thoughts.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Dan White, 2 Seagate. I just have two quick ones. One on maintenance. What is the frequency of the sump clean out on the current system, and then what are you committing to on the proposed system?
Okay, the town is obligated, there's a state permit for municipalities that maintain storm systems. Not every municipality in the state is required, but Darien is one, just because of the size of the town, the area, the population density. So that permit requires every catch basin to be inspected once every 3 years. And if during one of those inspections, it's noted that the basin is 50% full, it has to be cleaned. And then it has to be re-inspected the following year. And if it continues to be at that 50% or more level, if it's chronically full, the town is required to track back and say, okay, where is this sediment coming from? So the town is obligated under the conditions of the municipal stormwater permit to maintain sumps and clean basins.
And to add to Joe's comment, our NIPSI permit, an MS4 permit, requires that we maintain and clean our catch basins once every year. And we have the luxury, because of our equipment and our manpower, to do that. And we track records. Joe actually helps us submit our MS4 permit to the state every year, showing that we do that. So we currently do once a year, and we're committed to do once a year for our systems.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, great. And then the second question is on the on the map of the proposed system, what's not shown is the state DOT pipe that comes in off Post Road, which is obviously one of the busiest roads in Connecticut. People are throwing garbage out the window all the time. Sand comes off trucks. There's tons of motor oils on the street. This is something we had asked you about. Have you guys done the research to figure out if there's oily water separators and/or sumps on that system?
We haven't been out there to look, but that is on our schedule to take a look. What I will say is, obviously that's a state roadway, so it's, the town doesn't have direct control over it. But Ed and I, before this meeting, discussed, we really should start meeting with the state just to discuss the plan across the Post Road, and that'll be part of that. Just so everybody here, and just to inform everybody, there are 2 catch basins on the Post Road. There's one on the north side of the Post Road that flows into a catch basin on the south side of the Post Road. This is just west of the Seagate intersection. And those 2 catch basins outlet into that channel that flows along the west side of Seagate. So that also contributes some sediment load. And the town is going to pursue with the state replacing those 2 existing catch basins with new ones with a deeper sump. The town in state standard is a 2-foot deep sump. The town is going to recommend a 4-foot sump at its expense. So we will probably having that meeting with the DOT in December, at least to start that process with them.
Awesome. Thanks again.
All right, sure.
Susie Fahey, I live on Coach Lamp. Just a question. Having lived in Darien for quite a number of years now, the Darien is pretty much built. And as we've lived here over the years, we just watch more and more the trees that have been taken down, the size of homes increasing, the amount of land left to absorb any of the water just seems to decrease year after year. And if that continues, how does what you're planning to do, I guess, mitigate those things that keep happening? You look at Norotan Heights, how it's changing, what they're doing downtown, how the train tracks cleared all the trees. And places that never flooded before. Streets we've lived on all our lives are now flooding. And is that truly because it's a 50-year or a 100-year storm? Or have we changed the town, the landscape where we live so much it can't handle even a regular rainstorm?
I think all those statements can be true at the same time, right? For rainfall, right? Obviously, in my last year's presentation, I had a graph that showed how precipitation is increasing over time. When I first started drainage design, I hate to say it's 30 years ago, but what was considered the 100-year storm then in 1994 is now the 50-year storm 30 years later. But also with respect to development patterns, there was probably a period, up until the early 90s where, stormwater management was an afterthought, right? So, as houses grew larger, people paved more. The more you pave, there's more runoff. So there has been development changes that have spurred some of this as well. But fortunately, Darien has actually been proactive in terms of how it regulates new development or redevelopment. It has some of the more stringent stormwater management regulations in the state. For example, if you were to, if you owned an existing house in Darien right now and you want to tear it down and build a new house, you don't get credit for the impervious cover, all the pavement, the coverage of the house, all the things that generate runoff, right? So you have to basically start with the runoff that's discharged from your new development has to be equal to or less than if that whole property was a bare meadow. So what that means is that you install infiltration chambers, it could be, dry wells, it could be a whole host of things, pervious pavement, basically pavement that allows water to seep in instead of running off. So there's a whole bunch of different stormwater management practices that are required now. And if you've ever, listened into the planning and zoning meetings, you'll hear, all sorts of things about chambers and stormwater, Section 880 of the zoning regulations. So the town is probably one of the more stringent ones in the state in terms of regulating stormwater management. And that's a function of the flooding problems that you've seen here. The town is 99% built out. And the other, issue that's unique to Darien is that your soils are just terrible here. They don't have a whole lot of water holding capacity, the groundwater is high. So the town has taken measures to try to stem some of that additional runoff that's been created by development over the years. Thanks.
Just more of a comment, actually. If I can maybe stand here, because maybe it might help for everyone. This is Carl Alto, 36 Coachlamp Lane. I suffered, the property suffered damage in 21, over $20,000 worth of damage. Only 10 was, I was able to get back from the insurance. I just want to have a comment here. I want to thank Ed for his help on the project and whoever else has been helpful for this. I'm a meteorologist. I spent some time in the Weather Service doing hydrology. So I just want to have a little comment, maybe, when we talk about 50 and 100-year storms and 24-hour rainfall, that doesn't really describe the issue here. This whole basin is more of a headwater. There is no river, there's no very creek. There's maybe a dry creek where some of the piping is. But it's very susceptible to rainfall in a very short period of time. So, for example, in August, whenever they had the problem in New Canaan and Wilton and further up, we didn't here, even though we got about 5 inches of rain. And the reason for that was it started and it stopped, and it started and it stopped, and it was over a long enough period of time where it didn't flood here. But we've had issues here with much less rain in a very short period of time. This whole piping system gets blocked up in an extreme event for 3 hours, 4 hours max. That's how much water we had. That's the duration of time that the issue was here. So I've been here for 9 years. I've seen it flood, my basement flood 3 times. Water coming into the property, into the windows of my house 3 times for a grand total of maybe 8 hours. So when we talk about upgrades, all we're looking for in 10 years is 8 hours. Those 8 hours are extremely damaging to our property, and I don't know if it's, as big of an issue as it seems because of the duration of the event, because of the situation that we have here. So that was my only comment. Thanks again.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Oh.
Hi, I'm John Tibbetts at 25 Saltbox Lane. Just a comment first. I have an old map from before houses were built on Saltbox Lane, And where Saltbox Lane East goes off of Saltbox, there is a pond on that drawing. And now there's a street. And just asking if there's any chance for state or federal funding for this project, or is the town just stuck with it?
Yeah, I know Ed has taken a look.
Actually, that's a good question, and I should have mentioned that too. With certain catastrophes, if you will, throughout the state of Connecticut, there is always flood mitigation grants that come out. So of this last storm that we had, it would be August, I think we had a large storm in upstate Connecticut. They actually declared an emergency, and they've opened up the portal for obligations to flood mitigation. So I'm currently looking into possibly getting some funding for this project through that, and I will continue to do that until the project design is done, and I meet with the Board of Selectmen, and they tell me what to do from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you for listening to my presentation. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Ed or Darren, and we'll get answers over to you. Okay, thank you, and have a good night, and happy Thanksgiving.